consumers are becoming very savvy and aware of what businesses are saying in this day and age. People are being scrutinized a little bit closer as to what their values are, what commitment do they make to their customers, and businesses are being held to account.
Hi, this is Michael from Modular Agency based in Taipei. I'm here with Vanessa, project manager at Modular. I'm very excited to talk to Jesse from Itchy Agency. Itchy is a PR and digital agency based here in Bali. Jesse is an expert in helping his clients localize their businesses, starting from Bali to Indonesia and beyond. And so I think there's a lot of lessons we can learn on how companies can go abroad, localize their products and services, and grow their businesses in a big way. So thanks for being here, Jesse.
Thank you for having me.
Can you talk a little bit about your background and how you got started, how you started the agency and that story?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Jesse. I'm from Melbourne, 29 years old. And, obviously being from Melbourne, that's kind of where this, Itchy Digital was kind of born. During prior to the pandemic, I was working at a fintech company. And I'd worked in agency. I had a desire to start a business, but just wasn't there yet. What I felt like I wasn't there yet. And then during the pandemic, obviously, it was a big shock to so many different industries. And the company I was actually working for, I got made redundant during that process. So it was one of those moments where it was a little bit of a realignment in my life, where I kind of realized that, I could either seek employment again. But at that point, I didn't want to leave my professional destiny, if you will, at the hands of someone else. So I kind of went forward with that desire to start a business, and so I started working, fleshing out, what is it that I like doing, what's my experience, and how can I deliver that value to clients and their businesses. So Itchy was very much born at my house in lockdown. Spent kind of days on end just sitting there thinking about what this agency could look like, and that's kind of where everything began.
Cool. Yeah, that's a cool story. It's interesting how the pandemic has destroyed a lot of businesses, but also created a lot of new businesses and new business models. And it looks like you and I both are kind of in the same boat, where we kind of started during the pandemic. So what makes me interested to talk to you is this whole idea of how you localize foreign businesses. I'll give you an example. In Taiwan, we used to have a Wendy's burger joint, I think many years ago, and it failed. And then they left. Meanwhile, other businesses have obviously grown and thrived in Taiwan and in Asia. So I'm very curious to learn how you actually help businesses localize foreign businesses. And maybe we can talk about what are some of the mistakes and pitfalls that they tend to make if, let's say, a business in the West wants to come into Asia or vice versa.
Yeah, absolutely. To give context about, why that's something I really value and the agency, kind of wants to position ourselves as is my first job out of university. I moved to Vietnam in Ho Chi Minh City, and I got a job at a PR agency, and they pretty much solely worked with foreign companies who were looking to enter Vietnam and thrive in the market. And, being the only foreign person that worked at that agency, my role naturally very much fell into, working with those foreign clients, liaising with them and strategizing with them and pitching to them. And I noticed that there was, something that this agency was missing, or became very good at actually, was really helping foreign entities enter a market in a really meaningful, localized way. And naturally, I just felt kind of drawn to that process of really holding a client's hand, helping them enter the market in a meaningful way. Because, what I did also observe in that process was so many foreign companies approaching an agency to represent them all around Southeast Asia. And the mistake with that was that assumptions were made about each market and their strategy of entering that market. And I think that's something that I really wanted to bring to Itchy, was that the way we work with clients is that we really, we educate them that you shouldn't be making any assumptions about, Southeast Asian markets. It's not a monolith. And we really want to work with clients to make sure it's a tailored approach that, speaks directly in a very, localized way.
So you say it's not a monolith. Southeast Asia is not a monolith. What do you mean by that? Is that an assumption that Western companies tend to make?
That's what I observed. I felt like a lot of the clients that we worked with, and it's an easy thing to do when you're a big company, because obviously the success is already there with the business, that sometimes with their market entry strategy or their, in-market strategy, sometimes the advice can come top down in a way where, like I said, assumptions can be made about their target audience in those markets. For example, assumptions about, in one market, a certain digital platform is popular. I noticed and observed that assumption would carry to other markets where they'd say, oh, well, this is popular in this market. We'll go, when we're having success in that digital medium, let's make sure we do that for all of the other markets. But the digital ecosystem, in Southeast Asia or even just in Indonesia, it's very diverse, and it does differ from market to market. So that's just one example of some of the assumptions I observed that people were making. And I just want to make sure that as an agency that we're really educating our clients about particularly the Indonesian market and the digital ecosystem here. And whether it's B2C or B2B, really understanding, for example, what channels you should be utilizing and why.
Okay, so can you talk a little bit about how you actually help your clients to enter a new market through your PR services, and what are those services specifically? Mm-hmm. And just, let us know about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think something that we always, encourage our clients to do if they're very new to the market or they've done an activity is always to conduct some market research. So, we've been working with a few clients around conducting, proper quantitative and qualitative market research so that their strategy is informed by their own research, that they're not looking to external sources for that research. In some cases, clients have already done that research, so that obviously makes the process easier. But I think starting with that market research is the best way to inform any type of digital strategy or communication strategy. So that's my biggest piece of advice we always give our clients.
Okay, but what are the actual services you provide for your clients? Because if they're looking to work with you, they probably want to know what are you going to provide?
Yeah, absolutely. So at what we specialize mostly in-house is the market research, is the media relations, the event management, coming up with a communication strategy that isn't just focused on media, but also focused on digital mediums. So we obviously also do digital ads, setup of digital platforms, and our sister agency also specializes in brand development and web development. So we're lucky enough that between the two agencies, the service offerings that we can do is pretty much full suite.
Okay, cool. So I come from a PR background, as I was telling you earlier. And kind of what I did mostly at that time, which was for a huge tech company in Taiwan, was focusing on the press release writing and distributing through PR Newswire. How has the PR world changed now in 2023? That was like 2017 or something. Is that still relevant, that writing a press release, sending it out, or is there other strategies we should?
I think it's definitely still relevant, depending on the strategy and the client and what their objectives are in the market. Press release distribution, securing media coverage is still very valuable and important, particularly if, the client is looking to, release a new product or, make big announcements, or if they're running an event like a roundtable or, any kind of customer event. It's always important to utilize the media. But I think what we're really seeing in the PR space is the importance of digital PR. And I think what I mean by that is really aligning your PR strategy also with your digital communication strategies. So obviously through social media. But I think we were talking earlier about PR being a very traditional kind of old school thing. I think there's actually an emergence going on between the emphasis on digital and that digital presence and the PR strategy, and making sure that those are really aligned, but also created together in a process. I think aligning the digital and the PR is just a really important thing that, all brands should be considering and definitely doing.
Yeah. So what happens, let's say, worst case scenario, or let's say if you're not doing this aligning, what are the pitfalls that happen?
Well, I think, it's a lot of, I can only speak from my own personal experience, but a lot of the time there's a disconnect between PR and marketing in some businesses, especially big companies where they've got their own PR department and a marketing department. often I've found that the PR department are usually working with kind of sitting a little bit closer to the top level executives around, obviously different strategic decisions that are being made and how that's going to be communicated. And then there's the marketing team that's really, dealing with, what the customer is facing, whether that's businesses. So if it's B2B, obviously trade shows and those kind of partnerships, or if it's B2C, through digital means or in person and whatnot. So I think when that disconnect happens, I think the value of PR really is that consumers are becoming very savvy and aware of what businesses are saying in this day and age. People are being scrutinized a little bit closer as to what their values are, what commitment do they make to their customers, and businesses are being held to account. And so obviously when values of a business are being communicated, it's usually from the PR side. But I think if there's not that awareness with the marketing team and how they're talking about their product, or how they're having conversations with their end customer, there can be a disconnect. And I think that disconnect is where sometimes wrong perceptions can be shaped. So I think that for me, that's the issue, with that disconnect piece. If it's not there, then perception issues, disillusion, and possible scrutiny depending on the situation.
So it's really important that a company will connect both of this together, and that's where Ichi will help to connect.
Yeah, I mean, that's how we kind of like to educate and work with our clients, is that they make sure that through whatever conversations they're having, whether it's a sales conversation or a strategic conversation, making sure that everything's aligned and meaningful, and also that whether it's their values or the way they operate, that's actually the case, and that there's not a bit of fluff going on. Because like I said, I think we're living in an era right now where there's a microscope on the way that people behave, how companies operate. So it's just important that the marketing and the communication is meaningful and respectful and honest.
So would you say that, like, to localize a business, what's the role in PR to help to localize a company, let's say specifically for the Southeast Asian market?
Yeah, I think, in terms of localization, starting with that initial market research piece of understanding where your target audience digests their information, what sources are they looking to, what authorities do they, have a meaningful connection with and believe in, and not just coming into a market and thinking, all right, let's contact all the mainstream media, the people that have the most, engagement. It's about selecting the right sources and being really targeted about that, I think, is the important thing. I think, I've worked with clients before, and I've worked in business before, where maybe because not that they didn't understand PR, but sometimes numbers and PR value and ad value are the KPI that gets ticked. And by doing that, sometimes they just approach big media outlets. But I think now there's so many subcultures and sub-conversations going on in different channels, different media, that it's really important to understand what those channels and what that media are, and really work directly with them, and not just go, all right, let's go for the bigger sources and get the message out as much as possible. Because you can amplify a message as much as you want, but it's about tapping into the right places where those conversations are going to be picked up and engaged with, all the messaging.
Is there a good way to educate your client on finding their niche? Because, like you say, they just want to see the numbers, the people that they want to reach, but maybe they're not their customers.
Yeah. I think, again, it kind of comes back to the market research and speaking directly with a brand or a company's target audience, and having that conversation with them about, where do you go to educate yourself around this, or where do you learn about this type of product? And telling your client that it's not all about PR and ad value, it's really about going where the conversation is being had. I don't think this is, ingenious stuff, but I think companies sometimes forget that it's about speaking directly to your customer, really understanding what sources they look to, because that's not always the same. I think media evolves differently, and sometimes media over time can start specializing in certain type of reporting, and it's important to keep up to date with that and those shifts that are happening in the media landscape.
So for those of us who, let's say, like a company who has a PR team, and enough manpower and budget, how would they go about approaching a totally new market, let's say Vietnam or Indonesia? Can you walk us through kind of step by step?
Yeah. Do you mean if the internal in-house team wanted to go into a market not utilizing an agency or utilizing an agency?
Let's just say if they wanted to do it on their own.
If they wanted to do it on their own?
Yeah, like how would you
Yeah.
guide them?
I would definitely think, if it's an in-house PR team looking to understand the market and the market's media ecosystem, obviously, there's, you can go online and you can pay for different research papers and whatnot, but I actually recommend going to the market and speaking with somebody who's an authority on that. So maybe speaking with a freelance, media officer or someone who's a professional in the media, and speak to them about the landscape of the media in that country, because it differs obviously from country to country. And I think to get that understanding, you need to speak to someone who's on the ground and is a local expert.
Yeah. Okay, so we were talking earlier about like a certain case study where, let's say, a company, I don't know if it was one of your clients, they kind of tried to go local from abroad and it was a disaster. And then I think they found you guys and you turned it all around.
Yeah, look, it wasn't that their approach to the market there's actually two case studies I can really bring up, and it wasn't that their approach was that there was two different challenges for both of them. So one company was a hotel chain here, and previously their hotels in Indonesia. They have hotels in other Southeast Asian markets, but obviously during the pandemic, the international tourism market had gone completely invalid, or everywhere really in Indonesia, like every other country. And they'd never had to have a strategy to attract the domestic audience, the domestic tourists who could still travel. So in order to survive, they really had to make that pivot to attract the local tourists. So, that process really involved actually working with their in-house team, and not necessarily their marketing team, just people that worked in that business that were Indonesians that traveled. They understood the hotel, they understood the hotel's strong selling points. So really working with them to not only package the product in the right way, but also to understand how to gain awareness to the domestic market. So, it obviously just starts with using local language, but it also begins with, utilizing digital platforms where foreign domestic tourists really look to read reviews, or in this day and age, it's a lot of, TikTok content or Instagram Reels and those digital content pieces that people look to get a glimpse of a hotel and, what the event property looks like.
Yeah, I definitely look more to Instagram now.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it depends on the people, on their demographics, age, and gender, on which platform that they use.
Definitely, yeah. I think in the case of Indonesia, Instagram is a really strong starting point, because the younger generation mostly, they obviously love TikTok here. But, if you're really looking for more of an approach that touches on millennials, Gen Z, but also people who are on the brink of millennial to, we call it baby boomer in Australia. Is that a global thing? Or yeah, baby boomer?
I think.
Yeah, it is. I don't know why I associate that.
My dad's age, they're the baby boomers.
Yeah, they're the baby boomers, right? Yeah, I stop myself from saying I'm baby boomers. But really speaking to them, because a lot of that audience is also on Instagram here in Indonesia as well. So really being present, creating engaging content that is interesting and appealing to showcase hotels' unique selling points, and also obviously marketing their different packages that are tailored to the domestic market. Because the thing about this hotel as well, the process of actually changing their product to attract Indonesian travelers was very different to foreign travelers. So yeah, again, it just comes back to that, utilizing the experts you already have in-house to understand your market, maybe doing a little bit of external research. And so that was the challenge of one of our clients.
Yeah, I think for the West, if you just show us a place with cool bars and drinking, everyone's going to go there.
We're keen. Yeah.
But I think for Indonesian, your priority when you travel is not drinking.
It's not. I think now culinary is very popular, and where you can have fun. Like when I go to Bali with my friends, we just want to have a lot of fun. And a lot of people my age, they prefer clubbing than bars, because it's more music, more fun, more activities.
I'm ready to kind of just join the baby boomers and
Same.
sit around, play golf.
Yeah, chill out. Yeah, I think the interesting thing about the Indonesian tourist market is that we found that a lot of Indonesian tourists would fly to Bali without a booking and would actually shop around and go to different hotels and just ask for a rate in person. So whilst you could attract a certain segment of the market through digital ads, you also had to be really ready for people who would actually rock up in person and speak to you about your rate, what's your, what's unique about your hotel and why should they stay there. So it's different because a lot of foreign travelers, if you're traveling internationally, you book your hotel, at least 60 days in advance, or 30 days. So it was a whole different situation for that client.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting what you do, because it seems like it's a highly specialized skill that you have to help Western businesses localize, especially in Southeast Asia, which is a very mysterious culture and market for a lot of people in the West. Do you have a certain framework that you use when you take on a new client, and could you go through that framework step by step, like getting into the granular of what you do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to sit here and pretend that we're the only agency in Indonesia that could offer what we do in helping them clients localize their strategy. I know many agencies that do that well here. I think something that we try to skills that we try to marry is that my business partner is also Indonesian, and we kind of bring two different perspectives, different markets. But usually when we work with clients, a framework that we always do is obviously that discovery call is so important to understand what their needs are, what their understanding of the market is, if they've operated before or tried an attempt, what was that process, what was the success, what was the challenges faced, and just really get an understanding about how they actually operate from a PR and marketing standpoint to kind of eye out what education pieces there might be there. Because something that we try to do in our agency, and because I've worked in-house in companies before, and when you worked with an agency, where the mistakes were made is that there was that disconnect between the agency and the client, where they weren't working maybe as intimately together as they should be. And something that we try to do is work as much as possible as if we were their in-house talent. So really getting to know the individuals who are doing the marketing, that are doing the PR, that are making the decisions, if we can get close to them, and opening up communication channels as soon as possible so that we have access to them to make sure that whatever that we're doing, they're not just across, we've also got their perspective from. So that's kind of our main framework. We kind of eye out where we need to potentially educate the client, but also establishing, which I'm sure that you guys do, is setting up those communication channels as soon as possible, because it just sets up a really good workflow with clients. I think it actually creates obviously a better relationship with the client, because they can see that you want to work with them in a meaningful way. Like I said before, holding their hand, but just working as closely as possible together to reassure them and to make sure that whatever work we're doing is meaningful.
Yeah, like one thing we do is we don't email each other. I think
as a project manager, I work closely with clients, and I try to be their friend. I think it really helps my job to understand what they need and what they want, and we don't want to be that cold or let them be cold to us. So we try to open up the communication gates between each other. It's very important to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is really important. And like you said, befriending them and making sure that it's not just strictly professional, in the sense that they get to know you, you get to know them. And it's like working with anyone, whether it's a business partner or a friend or, someone you don't know. It's important to have a really healthy, positive relationship that goes beyond the professional, where you let them know that they can, bounce ideas off you or also approach you. You want to be approachable to your clients.
So once you establish the good communication channels, do you mean you communicate by Slack or messaging mostly, or do you do more phone calls? Like how exactly?
Well, in the context of Indonesia, we love WhatsApp here. So setting up a WhatsApp channel straight away, that kind of replaces the need for a Slack or a Teams. WhatsApp's just nice and immediate. It's on your phone. Slack and Teams are also on your phone, but everybody's very fluent in WhatsApp here. So setting up that WhatsApp group, and also setting up regular calls so that there's transparency in the work and the relationship, so that it makes them feel like, and them know that you want to be accountable to the work that you're doing, and have a face-to-face conversation. I know that during the pandemic, it all very much moved online to video calling. So, which obviously helped a lot with businesses, and there's been a lot of positives out of that. But, the days of meeting with your client in person has really dropped back considerably. So just making sure that you do those video calls to make sure the client feels like you are connecting with them on camera in as personal way as possible, whether, and if they are in the destination where you're working, if they're in Bali, catch up with them. Catch up with them as much as possible.
Have a nice lunch or something.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so what are the next steps in your framework? So you establish the communication, and then how does that working process go to where, normally the way I see agencies as a bridge between where the client is and where they want to be, sort of like a promised land,
Mm-hmm.
and then we act as a bridge. So what's the next step in that bridge, and is there maybe like 3 to 5 steps or something?
Yeah, absolutely.
Break it down to.
Yeah. So I think, after that initial, discovery of understanding where they might need to be educated, what they're looking for, setting up the communication channels, is really coming up with that meaningful proposal that talks them through a strategy, why it's valuable, and providing as much insights as possible to really validate the work and, make them feel comfortable with you, as a business, and that you've got their best interests at heart, and that you also understand specifically what they need. So not being generalist about or making assumptions back to that, but really creating a meaningful proposal and walking them through that. And obviously then the next step is just, that timeline of when and why. And then after that, the way you start to implement that activity, and throughout that implementation process, that the communication is the same as, or if not increased, so that you don't want them to feel like, that you've agreed on a strategy and they understand, what we as agencies are doing for them, but making sure that they go along the ride with you, because it might be a strategy that they've never done before and that they don't really have much awareness of. So really showing the value in it by walking them through the process, by keeping that communication up. And then I think throughout that process, we always, as much as we possible, like to keep reporting, not just to monthly, not being rigid about the way you report, really as much as possible communicating updates as much as possible, so that that value comes through quickly for them. Because, you don't want the client to become disenchanted or anyway, and that usually happens when there's a lack of communication. It's, pretty simple stuff that I'm sure that you guys are fully aware of. So, keeping up those live updates as to what's been worked on, sending drafts over to them to make sure that you're piquing their brain too, and that they feel like they've played a part of the creative process of coming up with the messaging or the content. Not siloing yourself as an agency and, giving them the impression that they're not part of the process. So I guess that's kind of the next steps of that, obviously just keeping that communication up, and then obviously depending on the duration of the project, the sticking to delivery dates, but not waiting till a delivery date to show them the value of what you're doing. I think it's pretty simple stuff. But I have seen it some agencies don't do it that well.
So then the service that you provide, would it be the press release first and then a digital campaign, or can you kind of show us the makeup of your PR service?
Yeah, well, I think, like I said, we do PR and integrated marketing. So there's obviously, with pretty much everyone we've worked with, there's an element of digital and there's an element of PR. And we like to commence them pretty much all at once, if not the digital a little bit before, depending on if there's a message that you're going out with in an announcement, making sure that the digital channels are optimized and ready to be, supporting and enhancing that message. So it would really obviously begin with just ensuring, auditing, setting up digital channels to make sure that it's going to support an announcement or an event. And then obviously there's that the press release distribution, eyeing out, media opportunities to very much enhance and amplify that message. So whether that's through, interview opportunities with the right opinion leaders or the right journalists, or doing obviously also a series of different media coverage, whether it's, securing feature articles or byline articles, making sure, I don't like the idea of just distributing a press release and being like, okay, cool, that this media picked it up, this is the value. Really blowing some wind into the sails of that message and make sure it's something that isn't just picked up and gone in a media cycle. So continuing the conversations on the digital platforms to support that message, and just making sure that it's a lasting approach and not just, a one and done kind of approach. Because obviously the media cycle works very quickly, but I think, particularly in this day and age, particularly if you're dealing with consumers, we're inundated with, options. We've got Netflix, we've got Spotify. Our ability to concentrate and digest one piece of information has rapidly increased, where we're digesting so much right now that it's not good enough to just get media coverage and think that people are going to, one, digest that for long enough that they might respond to it, but have a conversation about it. You need to make sure that the conversation is happening in multiple places to really grab people's attention, because we're moving through things super quick at the moment, and our attention span is low.
It's getting.
When I say we, customers, you know what I mean? Yeah.
It's okay. If you say we, you can include me.
Yeah. I'm speaking for myself, just the process of being overwhelmed with choice. It's hard to concentrate on one thing these days. So I always like to think about that from a PR perspective and just make sure that what you're putting out there isn't just...
It's easy to digest for consumers.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Easy and, amplified in a way where it'll show up one place and another place to that target audience. Because if it's just one place, it might not be as effective.
Exactly. Because I think now, since micro content, people's live attention span just decreased.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I try not to watch too much micro content and read more books. So I still have that hyper focus mode on.
Yeah, I think working in this space, you guys can probably agree that you become very attuned to, obviously how we help our clients grab people's attention, that you don't want to yourself fall into that place where you're just like scrolling and not digesting information. And that's where it's funny that we're kind of pivoting back to, slowing down a little bit by reading books or kind of minimizing our intake of micro content to ensure that, we're not just, quickly getting inundated and not actually like taking things in a little bit.
So one of the things that interested me about your company is you are doing PR plus integrated marketing. So can you talk about what exactly is integrated marketing? It sounds like marketing jargon. Like no one's really sure what it means.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think people can define it differently. For me, integrated marketing is those strategies and tools that help support PR, and that kind of, so when I think of integrated marketing, things like social media marketing, influencer marketing, digital ads. So it is a bit of a broad term, but I think sometimes when people think about things like influencer marketing, social media, it sometimes sits on the PR side. But when you're running digital ads and different digital strategies, that's part of digital marketing. So integrated marketing is kind of those things I like to think of that are in between and supportive of PR and digital marketing. So taking things from both sides and kind of bringing them together.
Okay, and then one of the things that I had to do as a in-house PR guy, I had to basically take a kind of a boring product, like a tech product, a mouse, for example, and figure out the message. Why is this mouse different? Why is it special? Why is it the world's first something? So I think it sounds like what you guys do is you connect that messaging plus the actual execution of marketing. Was that more or less?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's how we do like to work with clients.
So in this environment of like micro content, TikTok, Facebook, it's getting more and more fragmented. Do you have a different PR framework for how you create that message? Is there something that we could learn from a PR guide if we want to launch products? And how do I take something that kind of boring, mundane, and create that hook or that message?
Definitely. Obviously, yeah, it depends on the product, it depends on the service and things like that. But something I always like to do with some clients, particularly if we're going out with a message or a narrative, is really sitting down and having a bit of a workshop about starting back to some of the origins of a business, about why are you doing what you do? What are your values? How have you come to the place that you're at right now, producing this product or doing this service? and kind of extracting the story out of them and what they think about it, and shaping that with, you know, what they might be releasing or what their new service might be, and making sure that the message they go out with isn't just about, you know, a tangible product or a service, kind of tying in their underlying values and story, I think is more meaningful. And I think it can be a little bit more, it just lands better with people these days, because I think, you know, in the modern era, we don't want to just learn about a product. We want the story behind it. We want to understand that it's come from somewhere that's meaningful, somewhere that has values, somewhere that has a story that we can grab onto. And I think people draw an emotional connection to that a little bit more, which I think is very important in the time that we're in.
I think one of the best marketing now is to learn how to do storytelling. Yeah, and I've been learning that for my own LinkedIn, and it's quite hard to tell a story that's really good for people to hear and make people want to listen to you. But I think it's one thing that everyone should learn.
Yeah. I agree with you. It is a hard thing to do, even when you're doing your own personal branding on LinkedIn, to kind of sit down and think, well, what is my story? Why do I do what I do? What, you know, what are my values, you know, in relation to what I'm trying to talk about? And that is a kind of weird, daunting thing to do. It's like when anyone asks you for your bio and you think, oh God, I have to summarize myself in, you know, 100 words. Like, you don't like talking. Like, I mean, people don't love talking about it. Some people do, but talking about yourself is actually a very hard thing. So making sure it's meaningful is actually a very interesting, sometimes challenging process.
So I have to bring this up because we seem to be in the middle of one of those like massive technological sea changes with the launch of the AI ChatGPT platform and Midjourney and the AI images. And so are we all going to be sleeping in the park pretty soon? Or what's the role of AI plus what we do and like storytelling, PR writing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, it is a very daunting thing, the rise of AI when it comes to its relationship with graphic design, PR, writing content. You know, you've seen those platforms that can generate blogs and things like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, it is daunting. And I think right now that's something I'm still trying to grapple with, because it depends what direction the world is going to go in with how we utilize AI. You know, there's been a lot of conversations about, people, you know, industries that are going to be put out of work from AI. Are we going to meaningfully take on that challenge, or are we not? And I'm a little bit concerned about the way it is moving, because it's like other issues in the world. We love to talk about them. We love to fearmonger about the potentiality of them, but really the meaningful response to them is often lacking. So I think with the PR space, I kind of try and have an optimistic outlook that I think the value of storytelling is always done with people, in the sense that a person started a company, a group of people started a company, and an AI bot can't tell me what their values are. Well, at least I think I've not at this point, unless they're going to start reading minds, which I think they might. But I think, you know, a big element of PR is that person-to-person conversation with the client and extrapolating that story from them. So I hope that element, I don't think can be replaced by AI just yet. But in terms of copywriting, graphic design, it's quite concerning.
Okay, so let's not freak out too much about that yet. Maybe next year we'll see. But I'm very interested in this idea of how companies can figure out their story. And I think PR people have this like amazing ability to do that, because, you know, we spend so much time thinking about it. And sometimes our clients are like, you know, somebody who does something mundane like selling machinery. And so what's their story, right? So how can businesses, especially let's say something like B2B software or B2B technology businesses, how can they figure out their story so then they can start launching these PR campaigns around the world?
Yeah, definitely. I think particularly, you know, it's always about drawing, you know, particularly with B2B tech, you know, talking about the value that technology brings to your end customer's life or their business. And, you know, I would like to hope that those tech companies start off with that kind of, you know, that mindset that they saw a challenge or a problem in a certain industry, and their technology, which is the amazing thing about technology, is that it steps in to alleviate that issue. And I think from a PR perspective, it's really about connecting that origin story of why they wanted to create the technology in the beginning, or not even technology, wanted to create that product or service, what was the initial thought of why you wanted to do that? You obviously encountered a problem in a market, and you spoke directly to that problem. So starting with that story, but then also connecting that story through case studies or through interviews with your partners or your clients about the value that it's brought to their life, and really humanizing it as much as possible, I think, is the strongest selling point, or, you know, what lands best with people is really that human connection to a product or a service as much as possible.
Okay, so disseminating that story, let's say you have the story, that's the PR part, and then next, integrated marketing, how you spread that around, right? And so what would you say is the best way, let's say you figured out your story, what would you say is the best way to start sharing that around? And I think a lot of people don't want to wait a long time for, like, for example, their blog to start getting traffic.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any ideas about how to get that out, get the story out as quick as possible?
Well, I guess, do you mean getting that story out, depending on who the audience is they want to get it out to, right? I mean, I think that it's really all about like I said before, making sure there's momentum behind a story. And that's when the value of creating a very comprehensive, holistic strategy comes into importance. So not just releasing a press release to the media, figuring out what other channels and what other places you can continue telling that story in a very quick way. I think a really great way, obviously it doesn't work for everyone, but events, also in-person events, is just a really great way to generate, you know, a bit more lasting conversation. Because of that in-person activity, it leaves an impression on your target audience where they'll go on and continue talking about it for longer, more so than what they read in the media, I think. So just figuring out in what spaces you can make sure there's momentum behind your story or your message. And I think, you know, for a lot of companies, an event is a great way to do that. Obviously, the sales opportunity after that is to follow up with people who attended the event or responded to it online. Or if it's through digital channels like social media, making sure that it's a two-way conversation. So not just about putting some posts out and creating nice content that people can grab onto, engaging with people, asking the audience, coming up with a series of engagement pieces like questions or surveys or something they can engage with, not just with their eyes, but also with their thoughts as well, I think is a great way to amplify a message.
All right, cool.
It's a nice tip, yeah.
What's one tip that we can learn from you to grow our businesses, especially we serve B2B tech and serve B2C tech companies. What's one tip we can learn from you to do PR in 2023?
I think, in 2023, this was valuable before, but I think it's even more valuable now, is just starting with the basics of really understanding who your audience is. What are some of the, particularly with tech, what are some of the challenges that they encounter in their industry, and really connecting those challenges with kind of the tangible solutions that the tech provides or the product or the service provides. And I think we're all looking for that, like I said before, that human connection a little bit more in our marketing at the moment, that emotional response. And it's not rocket science, understanding how your audience, what they respond to in an emotional way and really connecting with them on a meaningful level. An example I would give of that is we also worked with a B2B tech company in here in Bali, and it was hospitality tech. And we our whole strategy we recommended a roundtable event. And the reason why we recommended that was that because these hoteliers have gone through a really tough 2 years. The biggest challenge for them was that 80% of their business wasn't coming to Bali anymore, and it was a really good opportunity for that company to come in and allow a space for them to have a conversation about the challenges that they faced. And this roundtable wasn't about promoting the product. It was about giving a platform for them, people from the hotel industry here in Bali, to come together, talk about what they went through, share success stories, share those challenging stories. And it was a really meaningful event. So I think things like that really allow your audience to kind of, have a forum to talk about their challenges. I think for many companies, it's important for you to allow your customers to kind of highlight that and, generate that human connection, I think is really valuable. And I don't think that's a trend that's going to go away, because I do think, more and more, especially working online, there's been a bit of a disconnect in the last couple of years, how we interact with each other. And I think going back to the basics of, working together collaboratively and sharing stories is a really valuable and meaningful PR strategy, I think.
Yeah, I think that's not, it's not an obvious strategy.
No.
But sometimes those not obvious things, what's the word? Not intuitive.
Yeah.
Tend to work really well.
Yeah. I think, sometimes, we get a little bit too focused on the revenue aspect or the conversion aspect when we try and do PR and marketing strategies. But I think that sometimes you need a PR strategy that the client or the business isn't necessarily going to convert out of it. It's about, it's brand awareness and brand respect. Do things, if you've got the budget, do things that, aren't all about converting and all about, sales and revenue. Do things for your customer. They're going to generate respect for your brand in a meaningful way. I think that's really, really valuable in the age that we're in at the moment.
It's really nice that you say bring back the human connection, because since the pandemic, we're starting to lose that. We're starting to have a gap between each other, because we are getting more comfortable to work remotely, to be far away from human. Yeah,
I agree. I think it's now it's time for us to all come back together after a couple of years being quite separated, and really celebrate. I think obviously during the pandemic there was just so much devastation for so many different industries, and I think now it's a nice time to come together, celebrate the success, eye out the challenges, and figure out how to go forward in a meaningful way. And
so it's great to have you, Jesse.
Thank you very much.
There's still a lot of value in storytelling and bringing back the human connection in old PR, new PR, integrated marketing. How can we contact you?
You can find Itchy Digital at itchydigital.com. We also have a small but growing social media presence. Through our website's probably the best channel, or obviously on LinkedIn as well. I'm on LinkedIn. My business partner's on LinkedIn.
Jesse on LinkedIn?
Yeah, Jesse Ward. I don't even know what my handle is, actually. It might be JLW93.
Okay.
Itchy Digital. Go to Google. We'll find you.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, yeah. Thanks for coming on the show.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you on the next video.
Look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.